Chapter 1. The Glittering Gala. The ballroom of Robert's Royal shimmered like a jewel box under the glow of a dozen crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of tuberose and ambition, as London's elite swirled in a kaleidoscope of silk gowns and tailcoats. It was the event of the season, Lady Beatrice Ashford's annual gala, where the cream of high society gathered to flaunt their wealth, whisper their secrets, and, on this particular evening, stumble into a scandal that would soon demand the attention of Hercule Poirot. Poirot stood near a marble pillar, his small, immaculate figure a study in contrast to the ostentatious crowd. His black patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was waxed to perfection, and his green eyes darted with the precision of a hawk. He sipped a glass of crème de menthe, observing the whirl of dancers with a mind that never ceased to catalogue details. To the untrained eye, he might have appeared a mere guest, but to those who knew him, Hercule Poirot was never merely present. He was a detective, summoned not by invitation, but by instinct, for Lady Beatrice had hinted at a matter most delicate when she begged his attendance. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured to his companion, Captain Arthur Hastings, who stood fidgeting in his slightly ill-fitting tuxedo. "Observe the elegance, yes, but also the undercurrent. In such gatherings, the smiles are masks, and the laughter hides daggers." Hastings, ever the loyal but slightly baffled friend, adjusted his tie. "Oh, come now, Poirot. It's just a party. Look at Lady Beatrice. She's positively radiant. And that heiress, Miss Vivian Langston, dancing with Lord Cavendish. They're the talk of the town." Poirot's eyes followed Hastings's gaze. Miss Vivian Langston, barely 20, was a vision in emerald satin, her auburn hair catching the light as she twirled with the dashing but notoriously indebted Lord Rupert Cavendish. Her fortune, inherited from her American industrialist father, made her the season's most coveted prize. Yet Poirot noted the tension in her smile, the way her fingers tightened on Cavendish's shoulder. "Quelque chose ne va pas," he thought. Something was amiss. Lady Beatrice Ashford, the hostess, glided through the crowd like a swan, her silver gown trailing behind her. At 50, she retained a regal beauty, but her eyes held a flicker of unease as she approached Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I am so grateful you came. I fear something dreadful is brewing tonight." "Précisez, madame," Poirot replied, his tone calm but probing. "What is this dread you sense?" She hesitated, glancing at the throng. "It's Vivienne. She's been strange, secretive, and there are rumors, letters, anonymous and vicious, circling among my guests. They speak of betrayal, of ruin. I cannot explain it, but I feel a storm gathering." Before Poirot could press further, a commotion erupted near the grand staircase. The orchestra faltered, and a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Vivian Langston stood frozen at the center of the dance floor, her face pale as chalk. In her hand, she clutched a crumpled note, its edges torn. Lord Cavendish, beside her, looked thunderstruck, his hand hovering as if unsure whether to comfort or retreat. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot said softly to himself, stepping forward, "the drama, it begins." He approached Vivienne with the grace of a cat, his voice gentle but commanding. "Mademoiselle Langston, may I be of assistance?" Vivienne's eyes met his, wide with panic. It's a lie," she stammered, thrusting the note toward him. "This says I've been dishonest, that I'm not who I claim to be. But I swear, Monsieur Poirot, it's not true." Poirot took the note, his gloved fingers handling it as if it were a rare artifact. The words scrawled in black ink were venomous. The heiress is a fraud. Her fortune is a house of cards. Expose her, or we will. No signature, no clue to its origin, yet. Poirot's mind whirred, cataloguing the faces around him. Lord Cavendish's flushed cheeks, Lady Beatrice's trembling hands, and the curious stares of onlookers like the sharp-tongued gossip, Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, and the enigmatic financier, Mr. Julian Warwick, who watched from the shadows. "Hastings," Poirot said, turning to his friend, "secure the exits discreetly. No one leaves until I have spoken with Mademoiselle Langston and examined this document." As Hastings hurried off, Poirot guided Vivienne to a quiet alcove, his calm demeanour a balm to her distress. "Mademoiselle, tell me everything. Who might wish you harm, and what is this talk of your fortune?" Vivienne's voice shook as she spoke of her father's empire, her sudden inheritance, and the suitors, Cavendish among them, who had swarmed her since her arrival in London. "I've received other notes," she admitted, "small threats, hints of scandal. But this was slipped into my glove during the dance. Someone here wants to destroy me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Fear not, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot does not permit the truth to hide for long. We shall unmask this serpent in the ballroom." As the music resumed and the guests returned to their charade of merriment, Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, piecing together the fragments of a scandal that promised to unravel the glittering facade of high society. "Hey, detective, quick question. Where in the world are you solving mysteries from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you want more twisted tales, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's case, it gets even creepier. Stay sharp." Chapter 2. A Whisper of Malice. The ballroom of l'Auberge Royale pulsed with forced gaiety, the strains of a waltz doing little to mask the undercurrent of unease that had settled over the gala. Hercule Poirot, ever the silent observer, stood near a gilded mirror, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. The anonymous note clutched by Miss Vivienne Langston, accusing her of fraud, had set his little grey cells alight. A scandal was brewing, and Poirot sensed that the glittering facade of high society was about to crack. Captain Hastings returned, slightly out of breath, his face flushed from his task. "Poirot, the exits are watched as you asked. No one's left the ballroom, though Mrs. Harcourt was rather indignant about it, kept muttering about vulgar theatrics." Poirot's moustache twitched with the ghost of a smile. "Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt. She is one to watch, mon ami. Her tongue is sharp, but her ears are sharper. She collects secrets as others collect jewels. Now tell me, what else did you observe?" Hastings frowned, scratching his head. "Well, Lord Cavendish looked rattled when I passed him, kept pacing near the champagne table, and that financier, Mr. Warwick, was whispering with Lady Beatrice in a corner, looked awfully serious." "Bon," Poirot murmured, his gaze drifting to the figures Hastings described. Lord Rupert Cavendish, with his boyish charm and mounting debts, was indeed hovering near the champagne, his eyes darting nervously toward Vivienne, who sat in the alcove, her composure fraying. Mr. Julian Warwick, a man of quiet menace with a reputation for ruthless investments, stood too close to Lady Beatrice, their conversation hushed but intense. Poirot filed these details away, each a thread in the tapestry of intrigue. He approached Vivienne, who was now flanked by her chaperone, Miss Clara Dunham, a mousy woman with spectacles and a perpetually anxious air. "Mademoiselle Langston," Poirot said gently, "you mentioned other notes. May I see them, s'il vous plaît?" Vivienne hesitated, then reached into her beaded reticule, producing 2 more scraps of paper. Each bore the same jagged handwriting as the first, inked in black. The first read, "Your father's fortune is a lie. Leave London, or all will know." The second was crueler. "The heiress plays a dangerous game. Her ruin is near." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he studied the penmanship, noting the slight tremor in the strokes, the flourish of certain letters. "These were delivered how?" he asked. "One came to my hotel last week," Vivian said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The other was left in my cloak at the opera. I thought they were cruel jests, but tonight—" She trailed off, her hands trembling. Miss Dunham interjected, her voice shrill. "It's outrageous, Monsieur Poirot. Vivienne is a lady of impeccable character. These lies must come from a jealous rival, perhaps someone envious of her engagement prospects." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "Engagement, you say? And who is the fortunate gentleman?" Vivian blushed, glancing toward Lord Cavendish. "Nothing is settled. But Lord Cavendish has been attentive. He speaks of a future together, though I've not yet decided." "Interesting," Poirot said, his tone neutral, but his mind racing. A suitor with debts, an heiress with a questioned fortune. Motive was beginning to take shape. He turned to Miss Dunham. "And you, mademoiselle, have you seen anyone suspicious near Mademoiselle Langston tonight?" Miss Dunham fidgeted, adjusting her spectacles. "Well, there was a waiter earlier. He seemed overly attentive when he refilled Vivian's glass. I thought it odd, but I didn't see him again." Poirot nodded, his attention shifting to the bustling waitstaff. One figure caught his eye. A young man with a sharp jaw and a nervous gait, now serving drinks on the far side of the room. His tray wobbled slightly, betraying unease. Poirot made a mental note to investigate further. As he pondered, Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt swept past, her fan fluttering like a weapon. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice dripping with mock concern, "surely you don't believe this nonsense about poor Vivienne? Why, she's the darling of the season, though I did hear—" She leaned closer, her eyes glinting. "There's talk her father's business dealings weren't entirely proper. Perhaps someone here knows more than they're saying." Poirot smiled politely, deflecting her probe. "Madame, the truth is like a fine wine. It reveals itself in time. But I am curious. Who shares such whispers?" Mrs. Harcourt's lips curled. "Oh, everyone, darling. The ballroom is abuzz. Why don't you ask Mr. Warwick? He knew Vivian's father in New York quite well, I hear." Before Poirot could respond, a sharp cry echoed from the far end of the ballroom. The crowd parted to reveal Lady Beatrice, her face ashen, clutching a small velvet box. "It's gone," she gasped. "My sapphire brooch, the Ashford heirloom, it's vanished from my private parlour," the guests murmured, their eyes darting suspiciously. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting Vivian's sudden stillness, Cavendish's clenched fists, and Warwick's inscrutable expression. A stolen jewel, threatening notes, and a frightened heiress. The threads of the scandal were tightening. "Mes amis," Poirot said softly to Hastings, who had rejoined him, "the game, it grows complex. A theft, a threat, and whispers of malice. We must proceed with care." Chapter 3. The Vanishing Heiress. The ballroom of l'Auberge Royale, moments ago a stage for opulence, now hummed with a different energy, panic-laced with curiosity. Lady Beatrice Ashford's cry about her stolen sapphire brooch had barely settled when a new shock rippled through the crowd. Hercule Poirot, standing near the alcove where he had last spoken to Vivian Langston, turned sharply at the sound of Miss Clara Dunham's wail. "She's gone! Vivian! She's vanished!" Poirot's green eyes narrowed, his moustache quivering as his mind sprang into action. "Calm, Mademoiselle Dunham," he said, striding toward the chaperone, whose spectacles had slipped down her nose in her distress. "When did you last see Mademoiselle Langston?" Miss Dunham wrung her hands, her voice trembling. "Only moments ago, Monsieur Poirot. After you spoke to her, she said she needed air. I thought she meant the terrace, but I went to check, and she's nowhere to be found." Captain Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, looked bewildered. "Good heavens, Poirot, she can't have just disappeared. The exits are watched as you ordered. She must be in the building." "Must she, mon ami?" Poirot replied, his tone enigmatic. "In a house of mirrors and secrets, one does not vanish without purpose. Come, we must search, and quickly." The gala had descended into chaos, with guests murmuring, and Lady Beatrice, still clutching the empty velvet box, demanding answers. Poirot, with Hastings trailing, moved swiftly to the terrace doors, his keen eyes scanning for clues. The terrace was empty, save for a silk shawl, Vivienne's, identifiable by its emerald hue, draped carelessly over a stone balustrade. Poirot examined it, noting a faint tear at the hem, and a single pearl bead caught in the fabric. "Curieux," Poirot murmured, pocketing the bead. "This shawl, it was not dropped by accident. It is a sign, perhaps, or a distraction." He turned his attention to the terrace's edge, where a narrow path led to the manicured gardens below. The fog was rolling in, a thick London mist that cloaked the grounds in mystery. Poirot's gaze lingered on the path, where a single footprint, small, feminine, and pressed into the damp earth, caught his eye. Hastings, feminine, and pressed into the damp earth, caught his eye. "Hastings, fetch a lantern. We must follow this trail." As Hastings hurried off, Poirot returned to the ballroom, where Lord Rupert Cavendish was now the centre of attention, his face pale and his hands unsteady as he downed another glass of champagne. Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, ever the opportunist, hovered nearby, her fan flicking like a serpent's tongue. "Poor Vivienne," she said loudly, ensuring all heard. "Such a delicate girl, and now this. Perhaps she fled in shame after those dreadful notes." Poirot approached, his expression bland but his eyes piercing. "Madame Harcourt, you seem well informed. Tell me, did you see Mademoiselle Langston leave the ballroom?" Mrs. Harcourt's smile faltered. "Why, no, Monsieur Poirot. I was conversing with Mr. Warwick about a mutual acquaintance, but I heard she was upset, clutching that note you took from her. Perhaps she couldn't bear the scrutiny." Poirot nodded, giving nothing away. He turned to Lord Cavendish, who was now mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "Milord, you danced with Mademoiselle Langston earlier. Did she mention any intention to leave?" Cavendish's eyes darted nervously. No, nothing of the sort. She was distracted, yes, but she said nothing about leaving. I swear it." "Poirot!" "Swearing is unnecessary," Poirot said smoothly. "The truth, it reveals itself without such theatrics." Hastings returned with a lantern, and Poirot led the way to the garden path, the light casting eerie shadows through the fog. The footprint led to a small gazebo, its latticework draped in ivy. Inside, Poirot found a second clue, a monogrammed cigarette case, engraved with the initials J.W., Julian Warwick, the financier. It lay half hidden under a bench, its silver surface smudged with what appeared to be lipstick. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said softly, holding the case to the light. "Monsieur Warwick, he is not a smoker, yet here is his case. And this lipstick, c'est intéressant. It matches the shade worn by Mademoiselle Langston, Hastings gasped. "You don't think Warwick did something to her, do you, Poirot?" Poirot's smile was inscrutable. "I think, Hastings, that we are in a web of motives, a stolen brooch, threatening notes, and now a missing heiress. Each clue is a thread, and Hercule Poirot will weave them into truth." As they returned to the ballroom, Poirot's mind churned. Was Vivienne's disappearance a flight from danger, or had she been taken? Was the cigarette case a deliberate plant, or a careless mistake? And what of Lady Beatrice's brooch? Could it be linked to this vanishing act? He paused, addressing the gathered guests who now watched him with a mix of fear and fascination. "Mesdames et messieurs, remain calm. Hercule Poirot is on the case. But I urge you, think carefully. If you saw anything, no matter how small, speak now. The truth cannot hide forever." Chapter 4. Clues in the Chandelier. The fog outside l'Auberge Royale thickened, casting a ghostly veil over the gardens, but within the ballroom the atmosphere was electric with tension. Hercule Poirot stood beneath one of the grand chandeliers, its crystal prisms scattering light like a constellation trapped in glass. The disappearance of Vivienne Langston, coupled with the theft of Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire brooch, had transformed the gala into a stage for suspicion. Poirot's mind, ever methodical, sifted through the clues. The threatening notes, the torn shawl, the solitary footprint, and the enigmatic cigarette case bearing Julian Warwick's initials. Captain Hastings, hovering nearby, looked flustered. "Poirot, this is madness. Vivienne's gone, the brooch is missing, and now everyone's pointing fingers. Where do we even start?" Poirot's eyes gleamed as he tilted his head upward, studying the chandelier's intricate design. "We start, mon ami, where others do not look. Observez the chandelier. It is not merely a decoration, but a witness. Its height, its position, it sees all." Hastings blinked, bewildered. "Sees all? It's a chandelier, Poirot, not a detective." "Précisément," Poirot replied, a faint smile curling his moustache. "And yet it holds secrets. Regardez!" He pointed to a glint among the crystals. A small object caught in the chandelier's lower tier, just above the dance floor, where Vivienne had last been seen. With a nod to a nearby footman, Poirot arranged for a ladder to be brought, and soon he was examining the object. A delicate gold earring, its emerald stone matching Vivienne's gown. "C'est extraordinaire," Poirot murmured, turning the earring in his gloved fingers. "This belongs to Mademoiselle Langston, no? Yet how does it find itself here, so high, so hidden?" Hastings scratched his head. "Perhaps it caught when she climbed up." "No, that's absurd. She couldn't have." Poirot's smile widened. "Absurdity, Hastings, is often the cloak of truth. This earring suggests struggle, or perhaps a deliberate act. We must consider all possibilities." Returning to the ballroom floor, Poirot sought out Lady Beatrice, who was now seated, fanning herself vigorously as Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt whispered in her ear. The gossip's eyes lit up at Poirot's approach. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found our dear Vivienne? Or perhaps her secrets are too heavy for her to bear." "Madame Harcourt," Poirot said smoothly, "your interest in secrets is most illuminating. Tell me, did you notice Mademoiselle Langston near this chandelier before her disappearance?" Mrs. Harcourt's fan paused. "Why, I suppose I saw her dancing nearby with Lord Cavendish, but I was distracted by Mr. Warwick's tiresome lecture on stocks. You should ask him. He was watching Vivienne like a hawk." Poirot's gaze shifted to Julian Warwick, who stood apart, his dark eyes unreadable. The financier's presence was like a shadow, subtle yet pervasive. Poirot approached, holding up the cigarette case found in the gazebo. "Monsieur Warwick, this is yours, oui? Yet you do not smoke. Explain, s'il vous plaît." Warwick's lips tightened, but his voice was steady. "It's mine, yes, but I lost it days ago. I keep it for sentimental reasons. My late brother's initials match mine. I've no idea how it ended up in the garden." Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. "And your connection to Mademoiselle Langston's father? I hear you knew him in New York." Warwick's jaw clenched. "We had business dealings, nothing more. Charles Langston was ambitious. Not all his ventures were successful, but that's no secret." Before Poirot could probe further, Lord Cavendish interrupted, his face flushed with agitation. "Poirot, I demand to know what's being done. Vivienne's missing, and I care for her deeply. If someone's harmed her, calmez-vous, milord," Poirot said, raising a hand. "Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is revealed. But tell me, when you danced with Mademoiselle Langston, did you notice anything unusual? A tug at her earring, perhaps?" Cavendish frowned, his brow furrowing. "Her earring? No, well, she did pull away once, as if something startled her. I thought it was the note she'd received." Poirot filed this away, his mind returning to the chandelier. The earring's placement suggested it had been flung upward, perhaps in a scuffle, or thrown deliberately to mislead. He glanced at Miss Clara Dunham, Vivienne's chaperone, who was now pale and silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Mademoiselle Dunham," he called, "you were near Mademoiselle Langston. Did you see her touch her ears, or perhaps someone approach her closely?" Miss Dunham stammered. I don't recall, monsieur. It was all so chaotic. She was upset about the note, and then she said she needed air." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The chaperone's vagueness was curious, perhaps too convenient. He made a mental note to watch her closely. As he surveyed the room, he noticed the nervous waiter from earlier, now clearing glasses with exaggerated care. Poirot beckoned him over. "Monsieur, you serve Mademoiselle Langston tonight. Did you see anyone tamper with her possessions?" The waiter, a young man named Thomas, paled. "No, sir, I swear, I just poured her champagne. I didn't see anything odd." "Yet your hands, they tremble," Poirot observed, his voice soft but piercing. "We shall speak again, I think." As the night wore on, the ballroom's glamour faded, replaced by suspicion and fear. The earring, the cigarette case, the footprint, all were pieces of a puzzle Poirot was determined to solve. Vivienne's disappearance was no accident, and the chandelier's silent testimony hinted at a struggle, or a deception. Dear listeners, the clues are sparkling like the chandelier. What does Vivienne's earring reveal about her fate? Is someone in the ballroom hiding the truth? Share your theories below and help Poirot piece together this glittering mystery. Chapter 5. The Mask of Motive. The ballroom of l'Auberge Royale, once a beacon of high society splendor, now felt like a gilded cage, its opulent chandeliers casting long shadows over a crowd gripped by unease. Hercule Poirot stood near the grand staircase, his small, immaculate figure a calm anchor amidst the storm of whispers and sidelong glances. The disappearance of Vivienne Langston, the threatening notes, the stolen sapphire brooch, and the peculiar clues, a shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, and now an earring lodged in a chandelier, had woven a tapestry of intrigue that demanded Poirot's little grey cells work at their finest. Captain Hastings, ever loyal but increasingly flustered, adjusted his tie nervously. "Poirot, this is getting out of hand. Vivienne's vanished, the brooch is gone, and now we've got earrings in chandeliers. What's next? A glove in the soup?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with amusement, though his expression remained grave. Patience, mon ami. The soup, it may yet hold surprises, but for now, we focus on motive. In every crime, there is a pourquoi, a kicker reason. And in this ballroom, motives hide behind every mask of civility. Poirot's gaze swept the room, landing on the key players in this drama. Lord Rupert Cavendish, his charm fraying under the weight of his debts, lingered near a refreshment table, avoiding eye contact. Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, her fan a flurry of calculated gestures, whispered to a cluster of matrons, her eyes darting toward Poirot with feigned innocence. Mr. Julian Warwick, the enigmatic financier, stood alone, his fingers tracing the rim of a glass, his face a mask of composure. And Miss Clara Dunham, Vivian's chaperone, sat in a corner, her spectacles fogging as she clutched a handkerchief, her nervousness almost palpable. Poirot approached Miss Dunham first, his voice gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle, you are distressed, and rightly so. But tell me, what do you know of Mademoiselle Langston's plans this evening? Did she speak of meeting someone, perhaps in secret?" Miss Dunham's hands trembled, and she dabbed her eyes. "No, Monsieur Poirot, nothing like that. Vivienne was upset about the notes, yes, but she only said she needed air. I should have gone with her. If I'd been more vigilant, calmez-vous," Poirot soothed, though his eyes noted her quick glance toward Lord Cavendish. "And you saw no one follow her to the terrace?" Miss Dunham hesitated, then shook her head. "No one, though that waiter Thomas was nearby. He's been hovering all evening." Poirot's moustache twitched. The waiter again. He made a mental note to interrogate Thomas further, but first he sought out Lord Cavendish. The young lord was now leaning against a pillar, his face flushed from too much champagne. "My lord," Poirot began, "you care for Mademoiselle Langston, oui? Yet your concerns seem tempered by agitation. Is there something you wish to share?" Cavendish's eyes widened, and he straightened abruptly. "I've told you, Poirot, I know nothing of her disappearance. I danced with her, yes, but she was distracted. That note upset her terribly. I only want her safe." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Of course, my lord. But tell me, your financial troubles, they are no secret. Did Mademoiselle Langston's fortune influence your affection?" Cavendish bristled, his fists clenching. "That's outrageous. I love Vivian for herself, not her money. You've no right to insinuate." "I insinuate nothing," Poirot said smoothly. "I merely observe, and I observe that motives, they are like masks, worn to conceal, but easily slipped." Leaving Cavendish to stew, Poirot moved toward Mr. Warwick, who had been watching the exchange with a predator's stillness. "Monsieur Warwick," Poirot said, producing the cigarette case, "you claim this was lost, yet it bears a smudge of lipstick, perhaps Mademoiselle Langston's, and your connection to her father intrigues me. What is it you know of her fortune?" Warwick's eyes flickered, but his voice remained steady. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, my dealings with Charles Langston were business, nothing more. His fortune was vast, but speculative. Some investments failed, and there were rumors of debts. As for the cigarette case, I can't explain it. Someone must have taken it to implicate me. Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "But the truth, it has a way of shining through, like light through a chandelier." As Poirot spoke, a faint clatter drew his attention to the ballroom's edge, where the waiter Thomas had dropped a tray of glasses. The young man's face was ashen, and he scrambled to clean the mess, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Poirot approached, his steps deliberate. "Monsieur Thomas," he said softly, "you are nervous, no? Tell me, what did you see when you served Mademoiselle Langston? Or perhaps, what did you do?" Thomas stammered, his hands shaking. I didn't do anything, sir. I just poured her champagne, like I said. I saw her arguing with someone, though, near the terrace doors. I couldn't hear what they said, but she looked angry." "Arguing with whom?" Poirot pressed. Thomas hesitated, his eyes darting toward Mrs. Harcourt, who was now watching them intently. I'm not sure. It was dark and I was busy. Please, I don't want trouble." Poirot let him go, but his mind was racing. An argument, a dropped earring, a cigarette case, and a stolen brooch. Each clue pointed to a web of deceit. Was Vivian's disappearance tied to her fortune, or was it personal? And who in this glittering crowd wore the mask of a villain? He turned to Hastings, who had been listening intently. "Mon ami, we must search the private parlour where Lady Beatrice's brooch was kept. If the theft and Vivian's disappearance are linked, the answer may lie there." As they moved toward the parlour, Poirot's little grey cells churned, piecing together the motives behind the masks. The night was far from over, and the scandal was only beginning to unravel. Chapter 6. Shadows at the Soirée. The grandeur of l'Auberge Royale seemed to dim as the night wore on, its chandeliers casting long, flickering shadows that danced across the ballroom like spectres of deceit. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, led Captain Hastings toward the private parlour, where Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire brooch had been stolen. The disappearance of Vivian Langston, coupled with the mounting clues, threatening notes, a torn shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, and an earring in a chandelier, had transformed the gala into a labyrinth of motives. Poirot's little grey cells were ablaze, weaving connections where others saw only chaos. "Poirot," Hastings whispered as they approached the parlour door, "do you really think the brooch theft is tied to Vivian's disappearance? It could just be a coincidence, couldn't it?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a hint of reproach. "Coincidence, mon ami? No, no. In the world of Hercule Poirot, there are no coincidences, only threads waiting to be woven into truth. The brooch, it is a key, and this parlour may unlock its secrets." The private parlour, tucked behind a velvet curtain, was a haven of opulence. Mahogany panelling, a marble fireplace, and a small rosewood table where Lady Beatrice had last seen her heirloom. The empty velvet box lay forlornly on the table, its lid askew. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, noting the heavy drapes, a single window slightly ajar, and a faint scuff mark on the polished floor near the fireplace. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, kneeling to inspect the mark. "This is recent, made by a shoe, a man's, I think, from the size and shape. And here," he pointed to a tiny shred of fabric caught in the fireplace grate, its deep blue hue distinct from Vivian's emerald gown. "This is not hers, but it is familiar, no?" Hastings squinted, puzzled. "It looks like silk, perhaps from a dress, but whose?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "We shall see. First, let us examine the window." He crossed to the window, its latch loose, and peered into the fog-shrouded garden beyond. A faint smudge on the sill caught his eye. Grease, perhaps from a glove or a tool. "Someone entered or exited here," he murmured. "The thief, perhaps, or someone else." As Poirot catalogued these clues, Lady Beatrice entered, her silver gown shimmering, but her face drawn with worry. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found anything? My brooch. It's an Ashford heirloom, priceless. And with Vivian missing, I fear the worst." "Madame," Poirot said, his tone soothing yet firm, "the brooch and Mademoiselle Langston's disappearance, they are entwined, I believe. Tell me, who had access to this parlour tonight?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "Only my trusted staff, and a few guests. Lord Cavendish was here briefly, discussing a charity matter. And Mr. Warwick, he asked to see my collection of miniatures. Oh, and Mrs. Harcourt popped in, claiming she needed to rest her feet." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And Mademoiselle Langston? Did she enter this room?" "No, not that I know of," Lady Beatrice said, but her voice faltered. "Though I did see her speaking with that waiter, Thomas, near the curtain earlier. He seemed agitated." Poirot filed this away, his mind returning to the nervous waiter. He and Hastings returned to the ballroom, where the guests' forced merriment had given way to open suspicion. Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt was now holding court near the orchestra, her voice carrying as she speculated loudly about Vivian's scandalous secrets. Poirot approached, his expression bland but his eyes sharp. "Madame Harcourt," he said, "you seem to relish the shadows of this soirée. Tell me, what did you see when you visited the parlour? And this fabric?" He held up the blue shred, watching her reaction. Mrs. Harcourt's fan froze mid-flutter, and her smile tightened. "Why, Monsieur Poirot, I saw nothing unusual. I merely sat for a moment. As for that fabric, it could belong to anyone. Blue is so common this season." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "but the truth, it is less common, no?" He moved on, seeking out Thomas the waiter, who was now polishing silverware with exaggerated focus. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said softly, "you were seen near the parlour curtain with Mademoiselle Langston. What did you discuss, and why so agitated?" Thomas's hands shook, and a spoon clattered to the floor. I didn't discuss anything, sir. She asked for a glass of water, that's all. I swear I know nothing about her disappearance or the brooch." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Yet you tremble, and your eyes betray you. Speak the truth, or Hercule Poirot shall uncover it for you." Thomas swallowed hard, glancing toward the crowd. I overheard something, sir. Not with Miss Langston, but with Mr. Warwick. He was talking to someone in the corridor, angrily. I didn't catch it all, but he mentioned deaths and ruin. I thought it was about business, but now—" Poirot nodded, dismissing Thomas for the moment, but marking him as a key figure. The shadows of the soirée were growing darker, and the motives, greed, jealousy, revenge, were beginning to take shape. Was the brooch stolen to fund a debt? Had Vivian stumbled upon a secret in the parlour? And what role did Warwick's heated conversation play? "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low, "we must find this corridor where Warwick spoke. The shadows, they hide more than we know, but Poirot's light will pierce them." Chapter 7. The locked study, the opulent halls of l'Auberge Royale, though still aglow with the flicker of candlelight, seemed to close in, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings ventured beyond the ballroom, following the thread of a whispered conversation overheard by the nervous waiter, Thomas. The mystery of Vivian Langston's disappearance, entwined with the theft of Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire brooch, had cast a pall over the gala. Clues, a torn shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, an earring in a chandelier, and a shred of blue silk, pointed to a web of deceit, and Poirot's little grey cells were now fixed on a new destination. The corridor where Julian Warwick had been heard arguing about debts and ruin. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice hushed as they navigated a dimly lit hallway lined with portraits, "this place is like a maze. How do you know where Warwick's conversation took place?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching with purpose. "Mon ami, the ears of a waiter like Thomas They are tuned to the rhythm of a house. He mentioned a corridor near the parlour, and this one, it leads to Lady Beatrice's private study, a place of secrets, I suspect. They reached a heavy oak door, its brass knob polished to a mirror-like sheen. A discreet sign read "Private Study," and Poirot tested the handle. It was locked. "Curieux," he murmured, producing a small magnifying glass from his pocket. He examined the lock, noting faint scratches around the keyhole. "This lock, it has been tampered with, Hastings." "Not forced, but persuaded." Hastings frowned. "Persuaded? You mean picked? But who would—" Before he could finish, Lady Beatrice appeared, her silver gown catching the light as she hurried toward them. "Monsieur Poirot, what are you doing here? This is my private study. No one is permitted entry without my key." Poirot bowed slightly, his expression serene. "Madame, I believe this study may hold answers to both the theft of your brooch and Mademoiselle Langston's disappearance. May we enter?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her fingers clutching a key that hung from a chain around her neck. "Very well," she said, unlocking the door with a trembling hand. "But I assure you, nothing is amiss here." The study was a sanctuary of elegance. Bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, a walnut desk strewn with papers, and a single window overlooking the fog-shrouded garden. Poirot's eyes darted to the desk, where a letter opener lay askew, its blade smeared with a faint trace of ink. Beside it was a crumpled envelope, its seal broken, addressed to Miss V. Langston, in a hand that matched the threatening notes. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said softly, lifting the envelope with gloved fingers. "Another note, madame. Why was this not mentioned?" Lady Beatrice's face paled. I found it here earlier, before the gala began. I thought it was a mistake, left by a guest. I meant to give it to Vivienne, but then everything happened." Poirot opened the envelope, revealing a single line. "Your secrets will bury you tonight." The jagged handwriting was unmistakable, identical to the notes Vivienne had received. "This was no mistake," Poirot said, his voice firm. "Someone placed this here, knowing you would find it. Or perhaps they meant for it to be found later." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, gasped. "Good Lord, Poirot, that's a direct threat. And in a locked study. How did it get here?" Poirot's gaze swept the room, landing on a small brass key on the floor, half hidden beneath a rug. He retrieved it, noting its intricate design, matching the study's lock. "A second key," he mused. "Lady Beatrice, who else possesses access to this room?" "No one," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "Only I have a key, though Mr. Warwick did ask to store some documents here last week. He said it was for a business matter." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "Monsieur Warwick, again. His name, it recurs like a motif in a symphony of suspicion." Leaving the study, Poirot and Hastings returned to the ballroom, where the guests' unease had grown palpable. Mr. Julian Warwick stood near a window, his dark eyes fixed on the fog outside. Poirot approached, holding the brass key. "Monsieur Warwick, you have been busy, no? A cigarette case in the gazebo, an argument about debts, and now a key to a locked study. Explain, s'il vous plaît." Warwick's composure flickered, but he recovered quickly. "I stored papers in the study, as Lady Beatrice said. I returned the key days ago. If it was found there, someone else must have used it." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "But the study, it holds secrets, like this note threatening Mademoiselle Langston. You knew her father, and you know of debts. What else do you know?" Warwick's jaw tightened. "I've told you, my dealings with Charles Langston were business." If Vivian's in trouble, look to her suitor, Lord Cavendish. His debts are no secret, and he's been desperate for her fortune. As Poirot pondered this, a soft rustle caught his attention. Miss Clara Dunham, Vivian's chaperone, was slipping toward the corridor, her spectacles glinting nervously. Poirot followed discreetly, observing as she paused near a servant's entrance, glancing around before dropping a small object into a vase. Poirot retrieved it after she left. A folded scrap of paper, bearing the same jagged handwriting. It read, "The study holds the truth." "Hastings," Poirot whispered, his eyes alight. "The shadows move, and the masks slip further. This note, it is a clue, or a trap. We must tread carefully." The locked study had revealed more than Poirot expected, but the puzzle was far from complete. Was Warwick orchestrating a scheme, or was he a pawn? And what role did the timid Miss Dunham play in this web of secrets? Chapter 8. Secrets in Satin. The corridors of l'Auberge Royale, though adorned with gilded mirrors and velvet drapes, seemed to close in as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings retraced their steps from the locked study back to the ballroom. The mystery of Vivian Langston's disappearance, entwined with the theft of Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire brooch, had grown denser with each clue. Threatening notes, a torn shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, an earring in a chandelier, a shred of blue silk, and now a hidden message from Miss Clara Dunham, Vivian's chaperone, hinting that the study holds the truth. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with purpose, sensing that the truth was cloaked in the satin elegance of the gala's facade. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with exasperation, "that note Miss Dunham hid. It's as if she's playing a game. Is she helping us or leading us astray?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Mon ami, in a game of secrets, every player wears a mask. Miss Dunham's note, it is both a clue and a challenge. We must look closer at the satin, the silk, the very fabric of this soirée." They re-entered the ballroom, where the guests' forced civility had frayed into whispers of scandal. Poirot's gaze fell on Miss Dunham, who sat in a corner, her spectacles glinting as she clutched a small satin purse. Her nervous demeanour was now tinged with something else. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. Poirot approached, his voice soft but commanding. "Mademoiselle Dunham, you have been most discreet. This note," he produced the scrap of paper, "suggests you know more than you have shared. Why hide it in a vase?" Miss Dunham's face drained of colour, her fingers tightening on her purse. I didn't mean any harm, Monsieur Poirot. I found it in my pocket after Vivian disappeared. Someone slipped it there. I'm sure of it. I was afraid to keep it, so I hid it." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "Afraid, mademoiselle? Or protecting someone? Tell me, what else was in your pocket tonight?" She hesitated, then opened her purse, revealing a small satin ribbon, its deep blue hue matching the shred found in the study's fireplace. It was Vivian's," she admitted. "She gave it to me earlier, said it came loose from her gown. I didn't think it mattered." "C'est magnifique," Poirot murmured, examining the ribbon. Its edges were frayed, as if torn in haste. "This satin, it connects Mademoiselle Langston to the study. But how? And why?" Before Miss Dunham could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, her fan fluttering like a warning, approached with a smirk. "Monsieur Poirot, prying secrets from poor Clara. She's hardly the type for intrigue. Why not question Lord Cavendish? He's been pacing like a caged tiger since Vivian vanished." Poirot turned, noting Lord Rupert Cavendish's restless movements near the orchestra. The young lord's face was flushed, his tie askew, as if the weight of the evening was unravelling him. Poirot approached, his tone calm but piercing. "Milord, your agitation, it is most revealing. Did Mademoiselle Langston share any fears with you? Perhaps about a ribbon, or a visit to the study?" Cavendish's eyes darted nervously. "A ribbon? No, she said nothing about that." "But she was frightened, Poirot. That note she received during the dance, it shook her. She mentioned something about her father's business, but she wouldn't elaborate." Poirot's mind raced. Vivian's father, Charles Langston, was a recurring thread, tied to Julian Warwick's cryptic business dealings. He sought out Warwick, who stood near a window, his dark suit blending with the shadows. "Monsieur Warwick," Poirot said, holding up the satin ribbon, "this belonged to Mademoiselle Langston. It was found with Miss Dunham, yet it echoes the silk in the study. Your name, it weaves through this mystery. Debts, a cigarette case, a key. What is your role in this drama?" Warwick's lips tightened, but his voice remained cool. "I've told you, Poirot, my connection to Vivian's father was business. If she was in the study, perhaps she was looking for something. Papers, perhaps, that her father left behind. But I know nothing of ribbons or thefts." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Papers, you say? And what might such papers contain?" Warwick shrugged, his nonchalance calculated. "Contracts, debts, nothing unusual. Charles Langston's empire was vast but fragile. Some might say Vivienne inherited his troubles along with his fortune." As Poirot pondered this, a soft clink drew his attention to the floor nearby. A small pearl button, its sheen catching the chandelier's light, lay near Warwick's feet. Poirot retrieved it, noting its delicate craftsmanship, identical to those on Vivian's gown. "Curieux," he said softly. "Another piece of Mademoiselle Langston, scattered like breadcrumbs. Yet you, Monsieur Warwick, stand where it falls." Warwick's composure faltered for a moment, but he recovered. "A coincidence, surely. The ballroom is full of such trinkets." "Coincidence," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "is a word for those who lack imagination." He turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, we must return to the study. This ribbon, this button, they suggest Vivian was there, perhaps in haste or struggle. And the papers Warwick speaks of, they may hold the key to her disappearance." As they moved to leave, Poirot caught sight of the waiter, Thomas, lingering near a servant's door, his eyes wide with fear. Was he a witness, or something more? The secrets of the soirée, draped in satin and silk, were beginning to unravel, but the truth remained elusive. Dear reader, the clues are as delicate as satin. What do Vivian's ribbon and button reveal about her fate? Is Warwick hiding a darker truth, or is someone else pulling the strings? Share your theories below, and help Poirot uncover the secrets of this scandal. Chapter 9. The Poisoned Chalice. The air in l'Auberge Royale, once fragrant with tuberose and ambition, now carried a chill of foreboding, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings returned to the ballroom from their investigation of the locked study. The mystery of Vivian Langston's disappearance, entwined with the theft of Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire brooch, had grown ever more tangled with each clue. Threatening notes, a torn shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, an earring in a chandelier, a shred of blue silk, a hidden message, and a satin ribbon paired with a pearl button. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, piecing together a puzzle that seemed to shift with every step. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low as they re-entered the ballroom. "That ribbon and button. Vivienne must have been in the study, perhaps in a struggle. But what's next? We can't keep chasing scraps of fabric." Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Mon ami, each scrap is a word in the language of truth. And now I sense we are approaching a moment of revelation. A chalice, perhaps, that holds not wine but poison." As they moved through the crowd, a sudden commotion erupted near the refreshment table. A young maid, her face pale as moonlight, was stammering to Lady Beatrice, pointing at a silver tray of champagne fruits. "My lady, I swear I only turned away for a moment, but this glass, it's not right." Poirot was at her side in an instant, his small frame commanding attention. "Mademoiselle, explain. What is wrong with this glass?" The maid, trembling, pointed to a flute with a faint cloudy residue at its base. "It was meant for Miss Langston, sir. She asked for champagne before she vanished. I set it down, and when I looked again, it was like this. I didn't serve it, I swear." Poirot lifted the glass with gloved fingers, holding it to the light. The residue shimmered faintly, a subtle discoloration that might have gone unnoticed by a less discerning eye. He sniffed delicately, his nose wrinkling. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "this is no mere champagne. It carries the scent of almonds, cyanide perhaps, or something equally sinister." Hastings gasped, his eyes wide. "Poison, Poirot. You mean someone tried to kill Vivienne before she disappeared?" "Or," Poirot said softly, "the poison was meant to ensure her silence. We must test this, but first we find who handled this glass." Lady Beatrice, her composure fraying, clutched her handkerchief. "Monsieur Poirot, this is monstrous. First my brooch, then Vivienne, and now poison in my ballroom. Who could do such a thing?" Poirot's gaze swept the room, landing on the nervous waiter Thomas, who was now clearing plates with exaggerated care. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot called, his voice sharp, "you served Mademoiselle Langston's champagne earlier. Did you see anyone tamper with this glass?" Thomas froze, his hands shaking. "No, sir. I poured it myself from the bottle. I left it on the tray for a moment while I fetched more glasses, but I didn't see anyone near it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yet the glass, it was meant for Mademoiselle Langston. And you were near her all evening. Tell me, what else did you see?" Thomas swallowed hard, his gaze flickering toward Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, who stood nearby, her fan still as she listened intently. I saw Mrs. Harcourt near the tray, sir. She was adjusting her gloves, but I thought nothing of it." Mrs. Harcourt's eyes flashed with indignation. "How dare you, you insolent boy! Monsieur Poirot, I was merely admiring the table setting. I touched nothing." "Madame," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "your presence, it is like a shadow, always near the heart of this drama. And your gloves, they are of kid leather, oui? Such gloves might conceal a vial of poison." Mrs. Harcourt bristled, but before she could retort, Poirot turned to Lord Rupert Cavendish, who was hovering nearby, his face a mask of anxiety. "Milord, you were close to Mademoiselle Langston. Did you see her take a glass of champagne before she vanished?" Cavendish's hands clenched, his voice unsteady. "No, she didn't drink anything after the dance. She was too upset by that note. But I saw Mr. Warwick near the refreshment table earlier. He was speaking to someone quietly near the champagne." Poirot's attention shifted to Julian Warwick, who stood apart, his dark eyes unreadable. "Monsieur Warwick," Poirot said, approaching. "Your name weaves through this mystery like a thread. Debts, a cigarette case, a key, and now a poisoned chalice. What were you discussing near the champagne?" Warwick's lips curled into a faint smile, though his eyes remained cold. "I was discussing investments with a guest, Poirot. Nothing more. If that glass was tampered with, it wasn't by me. Perhaps you should ask Miss Dunham. She was fussing over Vivian all evening." Miss Clara Dunham, seated nearby, gasped, her spectacles slipping down her nose. "Me? I would never harm Vivienne. I only wanted to protect her." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was relentless. "Protect her, mademoiselle, or protect a secret? Your ribbon, your hidden note, both suggest you know more than you say." As the guests murmured, Poirot's thoughts raced. The poisoned glass, meant for Vivienne, suggested a motive beyond theft, a desire to silence her permanently. Was it tied to her fortune, her father's debts, or a personal betrayal? And how did the satin ribbon and pearl button connect to the study's secrets? "Hastings," Poirot whispered, "we must examine the servants' quarters. If poison was brought here, it came through hidden hands. The chalice, it is poisoned, but the truth, it will be pure." Chapter 10. Footprints in the Fog. The fog outside Auberge Royale had thickened into a dense shroud, cloaking the gardens in an eerie silence that seemed to mirror the tension within the ballroom. Hercule Poirot, his small frame undaunted by the mounting mysteries, led Captain Hastings toward the servants' quarters, determined to uncover the source of the poisoned champagne glass meant for Vivian Langston. The clues, threatening notes, a torn shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, an earring in a chandelier, a shred of blue silk, a hidden message, a satin ribbon, a pearl button, and now a glass tainted with the faint scent of almonds, formed a complex puzzle that Poirot's little grey cells were piecing together with relentless precision. "Poirot," Hastings said, his breath visible in the chilly corridor, "this poison business is chilling. If someone tried to kill Vivienne, her disappearance must be connected. But how do we find her in this fog?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching with purpose. "Mon ami, the fog. It conceals, but it also reveals. Footprints, they linger in such damp air. We shall follow them, and they will lead us closer to the truth." They reached the servants' entrance, a narrow door leading to the gardens. Poirot paused, his magnifying glass in hand, examining the threshold. The damp stone bore faint marks, footprints small and delicate, matching the one found near the gazebo. But beside them was a larger print, heavier, with a distinctive heel pattern. "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "Two sets of prints, one likely Mademoiselle Langston's, the other a man's, perhaps. They lead into the fog." Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. "Into the garden, in this weather. Surely she wouldn't wander out there willingly." "Willingly or not," Poirot said, "we must follow." He beckoned a footman for a lantern, and the two ventured into the misty gardens, the light casting ghostly beams through the fog. The footprints led to a gravel path, where they grew faint but unmistakable. Poirot knelt, noting a crushed rose petal near the smaller prints, its scent still fresh. "This rose, it is from the ballroom's arrangements," he said. "Mademoiselle Langston carried it, perhaps, or it fell in a struggle." As they followed the trail, the path veered toward a small fountain, its water barely audible in the dense air. There, half hidden by ivy, Poirot spotted a glint of metal, a woman's hairpin, its pearl tip matching Vivian's gown. Mon Dieu, he said, retrieving it with gloved fingers. Another piece of Mademoiselle Langston, left like a breadcrumb. But is she leading us, or is someone else? Hastings frowned. You think someone's planting these clues to mislead us. But who? Warwick, Cavendish, that waiter Thomas? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. All possible, Hastings. But let us return to the ballroom. The footprints, they tell a story, but the players in this drama must reveal more. Back in the ballroom, the guests' unease had turned to restless agitation. Lord Rupert Cavendish was now slumped in a chair, his face pale as he clutched a glass of brandy. Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, her fan still but her eyes sharp, whispered to a group of matrons, casting glances at Poirot. Mr. Julian Warwick stood near the orchestra, his dark suit blending with the shadows, while Miss Clara Dunham, Vivian's chaperone, fidgeted with her satin purse, her spectacles fogging with anxiety. Poirot approached Thomas the waiter, who was clearing a tray with trembling hands. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding, "you saw Mademoiselle Langston near the servants' entrance. Did you see her leave, or was she accompanied?" Thomas's eyes widened, his voice barely a whisper. I saw her step outside, sir, but I didn't see anyone with her. She looked frightened, though, clutching something, a letter maybe. I thought she was just getting air." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A letter, you say? And where were you when the champagne glass was tampered with?" Thomas flinched. "I was fetching more bottles, sir. I swear I didn't touch that glass after pouring it." Poirot nodded, dismissing him for now, but noting his fear. He turned to Mrs. Harcourt, who had edged closer, her curiosity barely veiled. "Madame," he said, "you were near the refreshment table when the poisoned glass was discovered. Did you see anyone linger there? Perhaps someone with a vial or a glove?" Mrs. Harcourt's fan resumed its flutter, her smile tight. "Monsieur Poirot, I see everything and nothing. The table was crowded. Lord Cavendish was there, as was Mr. Warwick. Even Miss Dunham was fussing nearby. But poison? Such a theatrical notion." "Theatrical, oui," Poirot said, "but deadly. And you, madame, thrive on the drama of secrets. What have you heard about Mademoiselle Langston's fortune?" Her eyes glinted. "Only whispers, that her father's wealth was built on shaky ground. Some say she inherited debts, not millions. Perhaps that's why someone wants her gone." Poirot's mind raced. The footprints, the hairpin, the poisoned glass, all pointed to a calculated effort to silence Vivienne. Was it her fortune, or a secret tied to her father's past? And whose were the larger footprints in the fog? "Hastings," Poirot whispered, "we must search the garden further, but first we confront Monsieur Warwick. His name, it is too often in the shadows of this mystery." As they moved toward Warwick, Poirot's thoughts churned. The fog outside hid footprints, but the truth was beginning to emerge, step by careful step. Chapter 11. The Alibi Unravels. The fog outside l'Auberge Royale clung to the gardens like a conspirator, muffling sound and blurring the edges of truth. But within the ballroom, Hercule Poirot's mind cut through the haze with surgical precision. The clues in the mystery of Vivian Langston's disappearance and the theft of Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire brooch had multiplied. Threatening notes, a torn shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, an earring in a chandelier, a shred of blue silk, a hidden message, a satin ribbon, a pearl button, a poisoned champagne glass, and a hairpin in the fog. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to unravel the alibi that would reveal the weaver. Captain Hastings, trailing Poirot as they re-entered the ballroom, was visibly agitated. "Poirot, those footprints in the garden, Someone followed Vivienne. And that poisoned glass. It's clear someone wanted her dead. But whose alibi is shakiest?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming with purpose. "Mon ami, an alibi is like a house of cards. One false card, and it collapses. Tonight, we shall test the foundations of Monsieur Warwick's story, for his shadow looms large in this drama." Julian Warwick stood near the orchestra, his dark suit blending with the dim light, his composure a carefully crafted mask. Poirot approached, holding the pearl hairpin found in the garden. "Monsieur Warwick," he said, his voice soft but commanding, "this hairpin, it belongs to Mademoiselle Langston. It was found near footprints that suggest she was not alone. You claim you were discussing investments when the champagne was poisoned, yet you were seen near the refreshment table. Your alibi, it is fragile, no?" Warwick's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained steady. "I've told you, Poirot. I was with a guest, Lord Ashford, Lady Beatrice's cousin. Ask him. As for the hairpin, I know nothing of it. If Vivienne was in the garden, perhaps she fled from her own secrets." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Secrets, oui. And you, monsieur, knew her father's secrets, debts, you said, and a fragile empire. Did Mademoiselle Langston threaten to expose something you wished to keep hidden?" Warwick's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Lord Ashford, a portly man with a florid face, approached. "What's this about, Poirot? Warwick was with me, discussing a railway venture, when the commotion over the champagne began. He didn't leave my side." "Vraiment?" Poirot said, his gaze piercing. "And where, precisely, were you standing, my lord?" Lord Ashford hesitated, his eyes darting to Warwick. Near the terrace doors, I believe." "Yes, we were admiring the view." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "The terrace doors, in this fog? A curious choice. And did you see Mademoiselle Langston pass by, perhaps with a companion?" Lord Ashford flushed, stammering, I didn't notice. It was too misty." The crack in the alibi was small, but Poirot seized it. He turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, fetch the waiter, Thomas. His eyes, they see more than he admits." As Hastings hurried off, Poirot's attention shifted to Miss Clara Dunham, Vivienne's chaperone, who was now whispering urgently to Lady Beatrice. Poirot approached, noting the tension in her posture. "Mademoiselle Dunham," he said, "your note, the study holds the truth, has led us far, but your silence is a barrier. You saw Mademoiselle Langston with someone, oui? Speak now." Miss Dunham's spectacles slipped, her hands clutching her satin purse. I saw her with Lord Cavendish, near the servants' entrance. They were arguing quietly. I thought it was about his proposal, but she looked frightened." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Frightened, you say? And yet you did not intervene?" "I didn't want to intrude," Miss Dunham cried. "Vivienne told me to stay back. She said it was private." Before Poirot could press further, Hastings returned with Thomas, whose face was ashen. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said, "you saw Mademoiselle Langston near the servants' entrance. You mentioned an argument, but not with whom. Was it Lord Cavendish or another?" Thomas swallowed hard, his eyes flickering toward Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, who watched from a distance, her fan still. It was Lord Cavendish, sir. They were arguing about money, something about her refusing to help him. I heard him say, 'You'll regret this.'" A murmur rippled through the nearby guests, and Lord Cavendish, overhearing, strode forward, his face flushed with anger. "That's a lie. I never threatened Vivienne. Yes, we spoke, but it was about our future, not money. Poirot, you must believe me." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Belief, my lord, is earned by truth. Your debts, they are a heavy burden, and Mademoiselle Langston's fortune, a tempting solution. Did you follow her into the garden?" Cavendish's hands clenched. "No, I stayed in the ballroom after she left. Ask anyone." But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, replaying Thomas's glance at Mrs. Harcourt. The gossip's sharp eyes missed nothing, and her silence was as telling as her words. He approached her, his voice deceptively mild. "Madame Harcourt, you are a collector of secrets. Did you see Lord Cavendish and Mademoiselle Langston argue? Or perhaps you know who followed her into the fog?" Mrs. Harcourt's fan fluttered, her smile tight. "Monsieur Poirot, I see much, but I say little. I did notice Lord Cavendish looking rather stormy after Vivian left him, but as for the garden, I was too busy enjoying the music." Poirot nodded, filing away her evasion. The alibi of Warwick was cracking, and Cavendish's story was fraying. The footprints, the poison, the hairpin, all pointed to a moment of confrontation in the fog. But whose hand held the poisoned chalice, and whose steps followed Vivienne's? "Hastings," Poirot whispered, "we must return to the garden. The fog hides the truth, but the footprints, they will speak." Chapter 12. Poirot's Gambit. The fog that enveloped l'Auberge Royale seemed to seep into the very walls of the ballroom, where the glittering facade of high society had crumbled under the weight of suspicion. Hercule Poirot stood near the grand staircase, his small figure radiating an air of quiet command as he surveyed the restless guests. The clues in the mystery of Vivian Langston's disappearance and the theft of Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire brooch had multiplied. Threatening notes, a torn shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, an earring in a chandelier, a shred of blue silk, a hidden message, a satin ribbon, a pearl button, a poisoned champagne glass, and a hairpin beside footprints in the fog. The alibis of Julian Warwick and Lord Rupert Cavendish were fraying, and Poirot's little grey cells were poised for a decisive move. "Poirot," Captain Hastings whispered, his voice tense, "you're awfully calm for a man juggling poison, theft, and a missing heiress. What's our next step?" "The garden again." Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "No, mon ami, the garden has spoken, but now we must make the guilty speak. It is time for a gambit, a little trap to flush out the serpent in this gilded nest." Hastings frowned, puzzled. "A trap? You mean to trick the culprit into revealing themselves?" "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice low. "The guilty? They'll grow nervous when the net tightens. We shall announce a discovery, a clue that threatens to expose them. Watch their faces, Hastings, for the truth betrays itself in the eyes." Poirot clapped his hands, drawing the attention of the gathered guests, who turned with a mix of curiosity and dread. Lady Beatrice, her silver gown now creased with worry, stood beside Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, whose fan was still for once. Lord Cavendish, pale and fidgety, hovered near the refreshment table, while Julian Warwick maintained his cool detachment near the orchestra. Miss Clara Dunham, Vivian's chaperone, clutched her satin purse, her spectacles glinting nervously. The waiter Thomas lingered at the edge of the crowd, his hands unsteady. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot announced, his voice carrying with theatrical clarity, "Hercule Poirot has uncovered a vital clue in the disappearance of Mademoiselle Langston and the theft of Madame Ashford's brooch. In the garden, hidden beneath the fountain, I have found a document, a letter that reveals the motive behind these crimes. It names a name, and soon the truth will be known." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Poirot's sharp eyes scanned for reactions. Warwick's jaw tightened, his fingers curling slightly. Cavendish's brandy glass shook, spilling a drop onto his cuff. Mrs. Harcourt's eyes widened, her fan snapping shut. Miss Dunham gasped, her purse slipping to the floor, revealing a glint of metal inside, a small key, identical to the one found in the study. Poirot moved swiftly, retrieving the key before Miss Dunham could react. "Mademoiselle Dunham," he said, his tone deceptively mild, "this key, it opens the study, oui? Yet you claimed to have no access. And this purse, it holds more than satin ribbons, I think." Miss Dunham stammered, her face ashen. I don't know how that got there. Someone must have slipped it into my purse, just like the note." Poirot's gaze shifted to Thomas, who was edging toward the servants' entrance. "Monsieur Thomas," he called, "you are in a hurry, no? Perhaps you know of this letter I speak of, or the poison in Mademoiselle Langston's glass." Thomas froze, his eyes darting to Warwick. "I didn't poison anything, sir. I only saw Mr. Warwick near the fountain earlier, before Miss Langston vanished. He was hiding something, I swear." Warwick's composure cracked, his voice sharp. "That's absurd. I was nowhere near the fountain. Poirot, this boy is lying to save himself." But Poirot's attention was on Mrs. Harcourt, whose sudden stillness betrayed her. "Madame," he said, "you have been silent, yet your eyes see all. Did you see Monsieur Warwick in the garden? Or perhaps someone else?" Mrs. Harcourt's lips parted, then closed, her fan fluttering weakly. I may have seen someone near the fountain, but it was too foggy to be sure. It could have been Lord Cavendish. He was pacing outside earlier." Cavendish lurched forward, his voice hoarse. "That's a lie. I was in the ballroom, greeting for Vivienne. Poirot, you must believe me." Poirot's smile was serene, but his mind was a whirlwind. The gambit had worked. The guilty were unraveling, their alibis collapsing under pressure. The key in Miss Dunham's purse, Thomas's accusation, and the shifting glances all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than he had anticipated. Was the letter he claimed to have found a fiction, or did it exist? And where was Vivienne, hidden, harmed, or part of the scheme? "Hastings," Poirot whispered, "we must search the fountain again. The guilty, they'll fear exposure, and their fear will lead us to Mademoiselle Langston." As the guests dispersed, their whispers now fevered, Poirot's thoughts raced. The poisoned chalice, the footprints, the study's secrets, all were converging, and the final curtain was near. Dear listeners, Poirot's gambit has stirred the nest. Who do you think is most rattled by his trap? And what might the fountain hide? Is Vivienne still alive, or is the truth darker? Share your theories below, and join Poirot in closing the net on this scandal. Chapter 13. The Final Curtain. The ballroom of l'Auberge Royale, once a glittering stage for high society's revelry, now stood hushed, its chandeliers casting a solemn glow over a crowd awaiting answers. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating authority, gathered the guests near the grand staircase, his green eyes sharp as he prepared to draw the final curtain on the mystery of Vivienne Langston's disappearance, the theft of Lady Beatrice Ashford's sapphire brooch, and the poisoned champagne glass. The clues, threatening notes, a torn shawl, a footprint, a cigarette case, an earring in a chandelier, a shred of blue silk, a hidden message, a satin ribbon, a pearl button, a poisoned glass, a hairpin, and a key in a purse, had woven a complex web, and Poirot's little grey cells had unravelled it at last. Captain Hastings, standing at Poirot's side, whispered, "Poirot, your gambit stirred them all. But have you truly solved it? Where's Vivienne, and who's the culprit?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his voice calm but commanding. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it is like a fine tapestry. Each thread must be placed with care. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal all." He addressed the assembled guests, their faces a mix of dread and anticipation. Lady Beatrice clutched her handkerchief. Lord Rupert Cavendish fidgeted nervously. Julian Warwick maintained his icy composure. Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt's fan was still. Miss Clara Dunham's spectacles glinted with fear. And the waiter, Thomas, hovered at the edge, his hands trembling. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonating. "This evening began with a gala, but it became a stage for crime. A stolen brooch, a poisoned glass, and the disappearance of Mademoiselle Vivienne Langston. Let us unravel the threads." He held up the threatening note from the study. These notes, accusing Mademoiselle Langston of fraud, were not mere malice. They were a distraction, meant to drive her to fear. The shawl, the earring, the ribbon, the button, the hairpin, all suggested a struggle, but also a performance. Mademoiselle Langston did not vanish by force. She staged her disappearance. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Lord Cavendish lurched forward. "Staged! Poirot, that's absurd. Vivienne was terrified." Poirot raised a hand. "No, my lord. She was clever. Mademoiselle Langston learned of her father's debts. Debts tied to Monsieur Warwick." He turned to the financier, whose eyes narrowed. "You, monsieur, knew Charles Langston's empire was crumbling. You pressured Vivienne to marry Lord Cavendish, whose debts you also held, to secure her fortune for your own ends." Warwick's voice was cold. "Preposterous! I had no such scheme." "Vraiment," Poirot said, producing the cigarette case. "This, found in the gazebo, was not lost. It was placed by you to implicate another. But the lipstick smudge was not Vivienne's. It was Madame Harcourt's." He turned to the gossip, whose fan snapped shut. "You, madame, were Warwick's accomplice, spreading rumours to weaken Vivienne's standing, hoping to force her compliance." Mrs. Harcourt sputtered. "I did no such thing. I merely shared what I heard." Poirot's gaze shifted to Miss Dunham. "And you, mademoiselle, knew of Vivienne's plan. The key in your purse, the hidden note, you were her confidant. She gave you the ribbon to plant, to suggest a struggle, and you hid the note to protect her." Miss Dunham's voice trembled. I only helped her because she was desperate. She feared Warwick would ruin her." Poirot nodded, then turned to the crowd. "Vivienne staged her disappearance to escape Warwick's pressure and Cavendish's pursuit. The poisoned glass? A ruse? She tampered with it herself, using a harmless powder to create panic, ensuring her vanishing would seem dire. The footprints in the fog led to the fountain, where she hid a letter. Her confession, which I found after my gambit." He produced a sealed envelope, its handwriting Vivienne's. "She is safe, mes amis, hiding in the servants' quarters, waiting for the scandal to break. The brooch, stolen by Thomas under Warwick's orders, was meant to fund Warwick's schemes, but Vivienne took it back, leaving clues to expose him." Thomas gasped, collapsing under Poirot's gaze. "I didn't want to, sir. Mr. Warwick threatened me." Warwick lunged forward, but Footman restrained him. "Lies!" he shouted. But Poirot's calm was unshakable. "The truth, Monsieur Warwick, is clear. Your greed wove this web, but Vivienne's courage unravelled it. The brooch is returned, and Mademoiselle Langston is safe." As Vivienne emerged from the servants' quarters, pale but resolute, The crowd erupted in murmurs. Lady Beatrice embraced her, tears in her eyes, while Cavendish looked away, shamed. Warwick and Mrs. Harcourt were led away, their masks of respectability shattered. Poirot bowed slightly. "The curtain falls, mes amis. Justice, it is served. The mystery is solved." Did you suspect Vivian's clever ruse, or were you misled by Warwick's schemes? Share your thoughts below, and tell us how Poirot's gambit captivated you.